In this presentation, we will see how to implement security for opcsystems.net. We'll see how to limit and restrict user access for both reading and writing data from WinForm and web applications. We'll see how to limit historical and real-time trend data, and also real-time and historical alarms, and restrict who can acknowledge those alarms and from what systems. In this video, we'll also see how to restrict configuration access and being able to change parameters for tags, data logging, alarm notification features, reports, recipe management, of course the security parameters, options, OPC server browsing, and being able to start and stop runtime system services and other common features of the OPC system service. We'll see how to change security groups and user information from your own Visual Studio application with the programmatic interface. All properties can be changed during runtime. The interface to change the security and user information implements .NET remoting, so you can do this over the internet. All features of opcsystems.net implement this. The OPC Systems component used to change the security and user information from your own Visual Studio application is a 100% managed component. As with all .NET components of the opcsystems.net product, they support smart client deployment. The security configuration and the users are defined in the service. You can programmatically define the security and users as demonstrated in the VB.NET example, or manually set it up with the configure application. The OPC Systems Configure application is found under the program group opcsystems.net. To define the security, select Configure, Security, and select the service that you would want to define. The default security group has all features enabled. To add a new security group, just simply enter a new name. Select the Add button in the lower left to add the new security group. With the Allow security group, we are going to leave all features enabled so that we can have an administrator account assigned to this security group. Let's now define a user for that security group. Select Configure Users, select the same service where the security groups are defined, enter a username. I'll use the username admin and a password. Then select the list of security groups and you should see the Allow security group there. Then select the Add User button in the lower left. At this point we can save the security configuration to a file. This saves both the users and the security groups in the one file. Now let's go back to the Security tab where we see the list of security groups. With the default security group, we can then choose what options to restrict or deny users from accessing until they have logged into the account of admin. The first thing we'll do is uncheck Enable All Features. Later in the video, we'll see how to restrict changing configuration parameters of the service, but now we'll see how to restrict access to reading values from the service under the Read Tags tab. For the default security group, you can choose to disable all tags from reading, and then optionally include specific tags that are allowed for all users. Let's do this by clicking the Add button in the lower left. We'll select the local service, and we'll add the tag ramp with the parameter value. This then allows the value parameter of the tag ramp to be read by all users, but disables all other tags from being able to read. We'll apply those changes to the security group. You can also choose to disable just specific tags with the default group. If you uncheck the Disable All tags, you can then add specific tags to disable, and all other tags would be available for reading. If you plan to have a remote service access tags from a service that has security enabled by limiting what tags can be read, you would need to specify in the remote service an option found under Configure Options. You would select a service where the data is going to be consumed. You would then want to set the property for security username for service and security password for service to a valid username and password that would have access privileges to read the values that are used in calculations in this service's tag configuration or in this service's data logging configuration if we're doing remote data logging to access those remote tags as a data source. You can also restrict what tags users can write to under the Write Tags tab. Under the default group, let's disable all tags from writing, with the exception of the pump signal. So all users will be able to turn on and off the pump, but all other tags they will be restricted from until they have logged into the admin account. We'll apply those changes and save the changes to the security file. The security file that we have just saved can be preloaded when the service starts under Configure Options. We'll select the local service, then there's the property to load the default security configuration on service start. We'll browse for that file that we have saved and apply those changes. Now when the service restarts, that security configuration will be loaded. Now let's use the example application found under the program group opcsystems.net to interact with the values of the ramp and pump signals and see how the security restricts both read and write access. If we select Controls, Labels, we'll see that the only value displayed here is the ramp signal at the left of the form. All other values indicate bad data quality, meaning that we cannot access the data for those items. If we select the Login selection in the upper right and enter the username admin with the password, when we click OK, we see that all values are then accessible. If we log back off, we see that only the ramp signal is accessible. Now select Menu Symbols. Now let's go back to the security configuration and select the default security group. Under the Read Tags tab, let's add a couple more points to allow all users to be able to read. Let's add the pump signal and also the valve signal. Apply those changes, and then under the example application, and we see that the pump and the valve both show the current value. Notice that all other opcsystems.net tags show bad data quality because the default security privileges do not allow those tags to be read. You can change the status of the pump, but when you click on the valve, nothing happens because the privileges do not allow users to write to that valve until they log in. Let's log in with the admin account. Now when you click on the valve actually changes. Real-time trends are also affected by the restriction of reading tags. If we select Menu, Trend, we can see that the data starts for the trend for this new time frame, and all ramp, sign, and random tags show the current values. Now if we log off with the application, we will see that we will only have access to the ramp signal. To just limit real-time trend information under the trend real-time tags, it is just the same as reading tags, but it disables only real-time trend windows for the tags that you want to define. So for the trends, it's a combination of both read tags and trend real-time tags under the security group. If either has the tags restricted, then all local and remote trend clients will have to log in to the proper privileges in order to access the data. You can also restrict history information from trends under the Trend History tab. This will restrict access from replaying history from databases, and you define field names defined in each of the data logging groups of your service. You can also restrict what types of alarms are displayed to local and remote users under the Alarm Real-Time tab. There we can see we can define a minimum and maximum priority. Let's change that under the Alarm Real-Time tab for the default security group to display only a priority range from 0 to 500, and apply those changes to the default security group with the Apply Changes button in the lower right. If we return back to the example application and select Menu Alarms, we only see alarms that have a priority ranging from 0 to 500. When we then log into the admin account, We will then see a range of all the alarms for all priorities. You can also restrict alarms based upon alarm group. Here we can choose to disable all alarm groups and then individually choose specific alarm groups to include. Let's select the alarm group values from the local service, click the Add Group button, and now we will only show to remote users under the default security group alarms that have the alarm group values. We'll click OK and apply those changes and return back to the example application. When we log off, we will then see only alarms that have the priority range from 0 to 500 and also only alarms that have the alarm group values. We can also restrict users from being able to replay alarms from history under the Alarm History button, again defining minimum and maximum priorities and alarm groups that are allowed for the default security configuration. Under the Alarm Act tab is where we can define what types of alarms can be acknowledged by local and remote users. To disable all alarms from being able to be acknowledged, set in the minimum priority to acknowledge -1 and the maximum priority at -1 as well, and apply those changes. Notice we can also define alarm groups to disable as well. When we return back to the example application, if we were currently logged off, when we double click on an alarm, you notice that the alarm does not acknowledge. If we log into the admin account, we then see all of the alarms, and when we double click on an alarm, you see that it is acknowledged. How you enable the client application to log in and log off with the alarm, trend, and OPC controls components, that is demonstrated in the VB.NET example, and each of the controls have a simple login method. And also from the individual alarm and trend windows, we see that there is an individual login and log off icon on the toolbar. To see how to programmatically define the alarm controls, open up the source code of the VB.NET example. That's found under the program group opcsystems.net and then example code. From the Solution Explorer, you can select the form main, right-click on it, and select View Code. If you then scroll to the bottom of this code, you'll see two subroutines, a log-off subroutine, and just above that, a login subroutine. There we can see we are calling the OPC controls login component with the method login and passing in a username and password that we want to log in for the application. You only need one OPC controls login component per application, and it will then define all OPC controls components to use the latest username and password that you've logged in with. To log off, you simply call the logoff method of the login control. We can also see that the OPC systems component used to programmatically define the service configuration also has its own login and logoff methods, as well as the trend and alarm component have their own programmatic methods as well. You can obtain the current user from the trend, alarm, and OPC controls components with the current user function. This returns the current username that is currently logged in with the components. With the OPC controls login component, we can also call the show user dialog method. That implements the same code as you have in the VB.NET example, calling the example login form user. However, if you use the show user login method, it only affects the OPC controls components. So if you have trends and alarm components, it is better to use the implementation shown here in the VB.NET example, where you define your own username and password, as demonstrated with the login form user form, and then programmatically call the login method on each of the components that you have in your application. The web components also have login methods, as demonstrated in the ASP.NET example. That is found under the program group, program files, open automation software, opcsystems.net. There's an OPC web controls example application. That is the source code of the same web application that you'll find from our website at opcsystems.com under each of the ASP.NET web components. So the OPC Web Controls, OPC Web Trend, and OPC Web Alarm components all have login and logoff methods that you can call from your own web application. That was demonstrated in the training video of opcwebcontrols.net. You can also restrict configuration information. Under the default security group, select the Tags selection. Here we can restrict adding a tag or changing any existing tag properties. If we uncheck the option to get tag names and apply changes to the default security group, and then select Configure Tags, when we select the local service, we see that no tags are displayed, and we get an error message saying that we have invalid security access for obtaining tag names. We do see the groups, however, as we have not restricted users from obtaining the group names. In order to log in with the Configure application, select the login icon at the top of the toolbar. Enter in the admin username and password. And then when we select the local service again, we'll see all of the tags are displayed. Let's go back to the default security group. You can also restrict if tags can be deleted, added, changing any of the properties of the tags, or even saving or loading tag configurations. We have the same features for data logging under the Data Logging tab, alarm logging under the Alarm Log tab, alarm notification where we can deny users from being able to modify any of the alarm notification groups, reports, recipes, and of course security would be one thing that you definitely would want to restrict under the default security group so that local and remote users would not have default access to your security group names, security configuration parameters, or any of the user information. I would suggest under the default security group to disable all security parameters. When we apply those changes, if you are not currently logged in, you will get an error message indicating that you cannot display the existing list of security groups. Under the Options tabs, you can restrict what configuration options can be read and also set from the users. These are the same properties found under Configure Options. You can export your security configurations and your security users with the CSV Export button, but you must have access privileges to read the security groups and all of its parameters and also the security users. Simply enter a file name that you would like to save to. You can then use Microsoft Excel to modify your security configurations and then import them back again with the CSV Import button. Remember that you must close Excel first before re-importing the configuration information back in, as Excel locks files and does not allow other applications to read or write to it. You can also programmatically set up securities and users, as demonstrated in the VB.NET example, found under the program group opcsystems.net and the example application. Here we have it running already. If you select Configure, CSV Import and Export, if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see a selection for obtaining the CSV security header string that is available for all users, but you may be restricted on what information is accessible with the CSV Export and what information can be set with the CSV Import. Here we are currently logged in with the admin account. If we log off and then select Security CSV Export, you see that we get a dialog saying that we have invalid security for obtaining the security group names. If we then log back in with the admin account, then when we select this option, we see that we have all security groups defined in the configuration. With the Security CSV Import, this is the programmatic method to add and modify existing security groups. We have similar methods for the security users as well. To see the source code of that, we can go back to the example source code, and under the Solution Explorer, we can select the form Configure CSV. If we view that code, we have methods on the OPC Systems component to return the header strings for security and obtaining the CSV strings for the security and user information. Here it's just one method we're calling on the OPC Systems component called Security CSV Export. There we're optionally passing in a remote network node name to connect to a remote service, and also an optional error string that will return success if the method is successful, or the actual error message if the method fails. Remember that if you want to use these programmatic methods and you have security restrictions on the security groups or security users, you will need to call the login method on the OPC Systems component. With this method, you simply pass a username and password for the account that would have the access privileges to read or write the security groups and security users. If you have any questions about how to implement security with opcsystems.net, visit the website opcsystems.com, and at the top you will find the sales link. There you'll find information on our corporate office. You can also send an email to support@opcsystems.com or contact any of your local distributors that are found here